Yes, another question in the audience here. A very talented audience here, apparently. Chamillionaire.
How you doing?
Hey,
Interesting
what's up, man?
panel. All right, I just want to. My question deals with like, what do you think is the best way to launch a business? Well, thinking of MySpace, Twitter, Facebook, online, you see all these articles, and they're always talking about their business models and how they're going to monetize these businesses, right? And I always wonder which one is the best one to do. Like, can you launch something? Should you have a business model first and think about how much money you're going to make and how you're going to monetize it, and then you start launching it so the fans and the consumers that are going to be on this social network is going to actually, be accustomed to the way it is? Or should you just launch it like Twitter? And Twitter's becoming real popular right now. Everybody's jumping on it, but then you see all these articles talking about how they're going to monetize, how they're going to make money. Do you think it's best to get the audience first and then worry about monetizing later? Or should you already have the business model set and then be like, this is how we're going to make money, and then we go?
This is a great question. It depends on how much resources you have, I think. If you have a decent amount of resources, you're able to raise venture capital, you can take a long approach like Twitter has taken, or even Facebook took, which is, let's not worry about making money. Let's worry about building an audience and building a product that people love. And a lot of VCs will give a hard time to their entrepreneurs, and you've probably experienced this. Why are you worrying about revenue right now? Just get to 1 million customers and see how they like the product. Don't even think about revenue. Just make a product that people love, focus 100% on that. And then there's other people who, when the market is down, when it's a bad market like it is now, they start riding people like, oh, you have to make money, you have to make money. If YouTube or Facebook or Twitter wanted to maximize revenue, they could put up trailers and roadblocks and instantly have tons of revenue. And I think that's what savvy investors realize. So I think it's good to have an idea of what the revenue model is and then raise money, build an incredible product, and then focus on monetization. But if you don't have the ability to raise money, obviously, you're going to need to make some money to keep it going. So
yeah, there's a card game called Hearts where there's a strategy called Shoot the Moon, which is if you go for it, you win big, and if you don't, but if you lose a little bit, you lose everything. And I think that is kind of what goes on in startups. If you look at the biggest guys in the web space, all of them didn't worry about revenue for a long time. Well, Google, Yahoo, the other folks in their YouTube, none of these guys worried about making a dollar at first, and what they worried about was making audience. And so the marketer in me would say, get to the dominant place in your business as quickly as possible. Try to just tell everybody that it doesn't matter for as long as possible, because if you can actually, I think that certainly in the web space, the key is to create a monopoly. And if you look at anybody who's making money, they become the dominant player. And I can't think of anybody who's extremely successful who has not essentially created a choke on everybody else trying to get in their space. It's really hard to do that, and most times you're gonna chicken out. Like, I certainly am a fan of actually getting to the middle and making a fair amount of money for my investors and my team. But if you're gonna make it big, I think you have to look at the audience first and foremost, and the people who really do, it's almost like they don't sell out accidentally. Like, if you look at Larry Ellison at Oracle, he tried to sell all his stock. He tried to get rid of his company, and no one would buy it from him. And then all of a sudden he's like, damn, I'm the second richest man in the world. If you look at Google, there were several times where Google came close to getting acquired that you find out in the buy and buy. And they tried to sell for like a lot less than they could have gotten just because they were, like in 2000, it sucked. And they couldn't. They didn't quite get what they wanted. And they sort of built market share, and then they stole the Overture model, and bam, they're in business. Life is good. A lot of people, though, don't have this problem with figuring out a business model. Like if you're Microsoft or Salesforce, actually success equals dollar success. But they really concentrated on selling marketing. If you look at Salesforce, they put way more money into marketing to be very unprofitable for a long time to become the #1 player in the market. So even if you have a business model, it's really a bigger question, which is, do you focus on instant revenue or do you focus on market share? I would say to win big, you got to focus on market share. But for a lot of people, it's, hey, focusing on revenue doesn't suck, especially in this time. You kind of look at, hey, there's a real question here. If you can afford to fail, probably consider market share. But if you can see, hey, I can make a little bit of money for my team, I'm willing to take a second place, then maybe revenue's good.
Yeah, the last business I did, Weblogs Inc., and the business before that, Silicon Valley Reporter, I was extremely focused on revenue because I didn't have any investors, really. I had credit cards to put things on, and that's a great motivator and a great focus. So when you have that focus, you're going to be like, I'm going to find a way to make this model work. And every blog we launched, we had to have an advertiser or sponsor on board ahead of the launch in order to get it there, which was an incredible amount of discipline. But I'll be honest, it's a lot easier to raise a bucket load of venture capital and just work for 2 or 3 years to figure it out. And I enjoy that model much better.
It's a risk, right?
I don't know if that, I mean, I know it's probably hard to believe, but
Sequoia here? No.
it's a lot easier to raise $20 million and then spend a couple years figuring it out, which is why I think the entrepreneurs who have that ability do it. And you know what? 5 years ago, before the Weblogs Inc. acquisition, I didn't have that ability. And after the acquisition, I did have the ability. So you know what? It's much better to just raise a lot of capital and then try.
It's a different risk profile. In other words, if you've got to make money the day one, it's a lot harder to take the kind of risk that's going to get you to that sort of top of success. Yet it does provide that discipline. Like I heard Krista Wolf at the WPP board meeting once talk about how they had a culture of revenue. Now again, Facebook, not so much the culture of revenue. They're much bigger now than MySpace is. Yet I would say that MySpace, one of the things I think that those guys can pull out of there is that those guys are focused on revenue, and at some point in time, that's going to be a very valuable skill to be able to sort of reinvigorate. So if you can't afford to fail, or if you're paying out of credit cards, you just can't make that bet. It's a very different place to be than if you've got $10 million in the bank.
And what I like about the sort of different models is you can try those different models depending on the type of business. If you're doing Facebook and the prize is whoever has the entire social graph, or Twitter, whoever has the entire short messaging system of the internet, those are multi-billion dollar, $5, $10, $15 billion value businesses, maybe more, maybe $100 billion value business like Google. You can take that moonshot. But if you're building a blog network or something smaller, a magazine, or
good point.
You can try to build revenue model. If I'm building a podcasting company, and maybe someday it would be worth $10 million or $20 million. You don't need to raise all that capital and put the pressure on you. And
so much the size of the prize basically matters in terms of what kind of risk you take.
Yeah. Basically. So, I mean, you wouldn't take $10 million in investment to open up one hamburger joint. But you might take $10 million in investment to open up an In-N-Out Burger, franchise and build that brand over 200 locations. So you have to sort of right-size the investment for the opportunity.